Gurmagat, Ken Corlett, and I say at the outset, in case I forget at the end, to thank all of the people who work in this place. It is a workplace, and I often remark when we leave here at 11 or 12 on a Wednesday night, the people who we pass on the way out are often the first people who we pass on the way in the next morning at 8 or 9 when the Dáil is starting again. And it's not a normal workplace, but it is. It's a great place for many people here to work together, and I just acknowledge the huge work that they do here in extraordinary circumstances. Minister, I rise to speak in favour of the bill, and I would like to see the bill, Minister, go to committee stage. And it's not because on the last day of term I've caught some sort of rebellious fever. I made a commitment to Deputy Gannon and Deputy Sherlock in 2019 in an agreement that we signed together to pursue the issue of re-municipalisation. And it was the right thing to do then, and I believe it is the right thing to do now. Now, can I say, Minister, you know, it's not an accident that there's many Dublin deputies here in the House. And even within Dublin, there is disagreement across Dublin among different political parties that re-municipalisation is necessarily the way forward. I know often some of our colleagues in the county councils of the city often are quite happy with the current service that they have, or they may have different views than us in the city. But Dublin City councillors, and Deputy Ward referenced the independent research that Dublin City Council commissioned in regards to this, are of the view that greater control by the local authority is the way to proceed. Now, can I break that down a little bit? The issues which Deputy Gannon and Deputy Sherlock are having in the city centre are vastly different than the ones that would be relevant in my constituency. I don't have that issue of bags. We don't have the same street structures or street networks. And so it's entirely appropriate that we have a different way of collecting waste in one area as opposed to another. In fact, I often think this House over-regulates what happens at local government level. When I see legislation around tables and chairs licences for payments, I'm aghast that we are so involved sometimes in local authority structures. We should be empowering local authorities to make a lot more of their own local decisions, including local taxation. And in the area of waste, we should be enabling local councillors to make those decisions too, to allow them to put in place waste solutions that suit their area. And if that means that there's a different solution in Dublin City Council than there might be in one of the county local authorities, then that's what it would mean. Unfortunately, that power now rests with the Chief Executive, and despite councillors and the elected representatives of a city wanting something different, they are not empowered to do that. So in my view, I would like to see this move to committee stage, because I believe this is half of the discussion which is needed. Deputy Gannon's right. The government believed that if Dublin City Council wished to establish its own waste collection service tomorrow, they could do that. Don't forget, Dublin City Council decided themselves to close their waste collection service. They decided themselves to withdraw from the market. They didn't privatise their service, they withdrew their service. And it is open then to do that. But the reality, Minister, is that without the financial ability to do that with the local authority and so on, no Chief Executive is going to take that decision. And that is what has happened. As I say, this bill is one half of the discussion. So if we're saying re-municipalisation is the solution, in some ways this bill could send us in the wrong direction if it's not matched on the other side. So, for example, this does provide competition for the market. Okay, one downside to this bill, and one thing I would be cautious about, is we could have a scenario, and in all reality, if the competition for the market came in reality, it would be private operators who would be the first that would tender in the first round. We could see a scenario where one private company would win the tender in all 4 Dublin local authorities, and we would essentially have one waste company, and we could see other waste companies collapse or withdraw, and we would then be left in a second round with no one to tender except for that one company. And that is one possibility. And I want to pay tribute to Deputy Sherlock and Deputy Gannon and others, Deputy Ward, because we've discussed all of these potential outcomes as well, Minister. So we know that this is not a complete silver bullet, but it does give the local authority control. It gives the local authority more power. It gives the local authority to say that in my area of Finglas, it's not appropriate that because an area is more affluent, people living in that road have access to 5 bin companies, and because somewhere else is less affluent, that they're stuck with 1 bin company and nobody else. And in some cases, bin companies won't even go into certain places, or they'll insist that residents have to bring their wheelie bins up a hill or out onto the main road. Now, that's not right, but there's no way of regulating that because we've competition in the market, not competition for the market. So I do hear you, though, Minister, in what you're saying in regards to the review. And I know there are many in government that believe that for a whole range of other reasons, including environmental reasons, circular economy and so on, and I know some of our colleagues in the Green Party in the former government also were supportive of this, for a whole range of other reasons around delivering the circular economy, that competition for the market has its positive benefits. And I hear, from what I'm hearing, Minister, is that part of the review could be an outcome of a franchise service. I have to say, your commentary, which you went on to explain about all the negatives of a franchise service, does not fill me with hope. And I would ask both you and my colleague Darragh O'Brien to consider, if you can't provide a national framework, empower local authorities to make those decisions themselves. Marie Sherlock says that no other capital city runs their business this way, and that's because they're capital cities. Capital cities should be making way more decisions about everything that happened in their area. If Dublin City Council had been allowed to address the housing crisis back in 2012, 2013 and 2014, when it was impacting them far more than anywhere else, we would have been ahead of the curve. So we should be allowing Dublin City Council, if their elected representatives so choose, to establish competition for the market, to establish their own bin service if they so wish. The Deputy Gallon's right. It's going to involve difficult political choices, because the waiver system that wasn't there did come at a cost. It was a direct cost, several million euro, nearly €3 million it costs every year. And councillors had to vote every year for that money, and that meant that €3 million went on that waiver, and it wasn't available for other services like parks and libraries and so on. But that's what local councillors do. They make those decisions. And sometimes we don't trust our councillors enough, and I say that because it was a Fianna Fáil government that actually removed the powers of local councillors in regards to waste. Obviously it was done because there weren't brave decisions being made around large-scale waste disposal and all of those reasons. But I really believe we've moved on in Ireland. I think we have far better and committed local representatives. And I'm saying to the Minister here on this one, there is a very obvious demand by the people who are elected by Dublin City to change the way they collect their waste. This is something that national government shouldn't be involved in. Let them get on with it. Empower them to do it. Let them make the popular and unpopular choices that are part of that. And in my view, I would, if I was in your place, I would allow the bill go to second stage, and we would need very significant amendments. We would need other elements to it, but I would allow the debate to take place. In the absence of that, Minister, I'd ask that you take on board the comments that have been made here in the House by members. And should you have the final review and the outcome, consider allowing Dublin City do its own thing. Consider local authorities, maybe don't limit it just to Dublin City, consider allowing any local authority that chooses to collect its waste in its own way to do it. Because it's not rocket science, it's waste collection. They should, at the very least, be allowed to decide how that is done.